Nobody warns you about the most brutal season of your life, the moment you realize you're alone and nobody is coming to clap, to guide, or to save you. If you've ever felt that cold silence after you asked for support and got excuses instead, this is for you. Today we're going to uncover the Machiavellian truth behind succeeding with zero allies, zero encouragement, and zero safety net, because power is often born where comfort dies. You'll discover why being unsupported can become your greatest advantage and how to turn indifference into momentum without becoming bitter or desperate. Comment the phrase, "I build in silence," if you're ready for that path. And if you want more ruthless clarity like this, subscribe, like the video, and stay until the end, because there's one quiet revelation about success that most people cannot handle. In Machiavelli's time, support was not a motivational luxury, it was a political weapon. Courts were filled with men who smiled in public and sharpened knives in private, and the one who depended on approval became easy to control. That's why Machiavelli kept returning to a simple, uncomfortable idea: when your strength comes from others, your fate belongs to others. The Stoics too, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, taught that the world is unstable and that attaching your peace to external hands is a form of slavery. Yet over time, modern culture disguised dependence as community and turned validation into a drug, leaving people more connected than ever and internally abandoned. This knowledge was misunderstood because it sounds cold, even cruel, until life strips you down and you finally see it. The wounds of our era are not only anxiety and failure, but the terror of standing alone with your own responsibility. There is a moment that almost nobody prepares you for, a moment when you finally understand that lack of support is not an accident but a test. When no one believes in you, when your phone stays silent, when encouragement disappears, something deeper is being asked of you. Most people interpret this as rejection, as proof they are unworthy or invisible. But from a Machiavellian perspective, this moment is not a verdict, it is an initiation. Power does not emerge in crowds cheering your name. It emerges in isolation when you are forced to confront the raw mechanics of your own will without external reinforcement. When you have support, your energy leaks outward. When you have none, it turns inward, condenses, and becomes dangerous in the most constructive sense of the word. You must understand a first uncomfortable truth: support is rarely neutral. Every hand that helps you also subtly shapes you. Advice carries the unconscious agenda of the one who gives it. Encouragement often comes with expectations. Even love can become a leash. When you grow with support, you grow within a structure that is not fully yours. When you grow alone, there is no one to please, no one to reassure, no image to maintain. This is why success without support often produces a different kind of individual: quieter, more precise, less dependent on noise. Machiavelli understood that those who rise alone develop a clarity others never reach, because they learn to read reality without emotional distortion. Psychologically, zero support forces your mind into a state of adaptive tension. The brain, deprived of reassurance, searches for internal order. You begin to notice patterns, to observe consequences, to think in terms of leverage instead of comfort. This is not romantic suffering, it is cognitive evolution. When no one is there to catch you, you stop making careless moves. Every decision matters more, every mistake costs more. Over time, this sharpens judgment in a way encouragement never could. This is why people who are heavily supported often crumble when conditions change, while those who were ignored adapt faster. They have already rehearsed adversity in silence. Another key mechanism is emotional detoxification. Without support, your illusions are stripped away. You cannot pretend you are misunderstood genius waiting to be discovered, because discovery does not arrive. You cannot hide behind potential, because potential feeds on validation. You are left with only one question: what can you do today, alone, with what you have? This question is brutal, but it is honest. It collapses fantasy and forces contact with reality. Machiavelli did not trust hope, he trusted preparation. And preparation is born when you stop waiting for permission. There is also a social dimension people rarely acknowledge. When you succeed without support, you are not shaped by group psychology. You do not internalize the fears, limits, and excuses of your environment. Many people are unconsciously loyal to the emotional ceiling of their circle. They do not want to outgrow it because growth threatens belonging. Zero support breaks that contract. There is no group to betray, no identity to preserve. This solitude can feel empty, but it is also clean. You begin to act based on consequence rather than consensus. At this stage, many people fall into a dangerous trap: bitterness. They turn isolation into resentment, and resentment into identity. This is where failure hides disguised as realism. Machiavellian solitude is not about proving others wrong. It is about becoming self-sufficient in purpose. If your motivation is revenge, you are still controlled by the absence of support. True independence appears when you stop emotionally negotiating with ghosts. When you no longer need recognition, even from those who ignored you, you recover enormous psychological energy. Another hidden effect of zero support is the development of strategic patience. When no one is watching, there is no pressure to perform prematurely. You can move slowly, build quietly, test without exposure. This is invisible growth, and it frustrates those who equate progress with visibility. Machiavelli valued timing above morality, above intention, above appearance. Acting too early reveals your position. Acting alone allows you to delay, to gather strength without interference. Silence becomes a form of camouflage. You also begin to understand the difference between confidence and certainty. Support gives confidence, but certainty comes from repeated self-reliance. Each time you solve a problem alone, something fundamental shifts. Your nervous system learns that you are capable of surviving uncertainty. This creates a calm that cannot be faked. You stop rushing explanations. You stop oversharing plans. You no longer need to convince anyone. This internal certainty is what people later mistake for charisma or authority, without realizing it was forged in seasons of being unseen. There is a final tension that defines this phase: the fear of becoming hard. Many people worry that succeeding without support will turn them cold, detached, or ruthless. But hardness is not the same as clarity. Emotional numbness comes from suppressed pain, not from independence. The goal is not to erase feeling, but to remove dependence. You can remain empathetic without being fragile. You can be kind without being naive. Machiavelli was often misunderstood as promoting cruelty, when in reality he promoted lucidity. Lucidity requires emotional discipline, not emotional death. At this point, an unanswered question should be forming in your mind, and it is the right one. If isolation sharpens you, if lack of support builds internal strength, then why does it hurt so much in the beginning? Why does the silence feel almost unbearable before it becomes empowering? The answer lies deeper, and it has less to do with others than with what you lose when support disappears. That is where the next layer begins, and where most people turn back before understanding what was really being taken from them. When support disappears, what hurts is not the workload or the uncertainty. It is the collapse of an identity you did not know you were relying on. You were not only losing encouragement, you were losing mirrors. Other people's belief in you had quietly become proof of your own existence. When that reflection vanished, you felt hollow, as if something essential had been taken. This is the hidden violence of isolation. It forces you to confront the difference between being validated and being real. Most people never cross this threshold because they rush to replace support with noise, distraction, or new alliances. Machiavellian solitude demands that you stay long enough for the illusion to die. This is where the ego fights back. The ego hates unsupported effort because it cannot feed on admiration. It will whisper that you are wasting time, that success without witnesses is meaningless, that struggle without applause is humiliation. These thoughts feel rational, but they are withdrawal symptoms. Your mind has been trained to associate movement with recognition. When recognition stops, the ego interprets it as danger. Understanding this mechanism is crucial because if you obey it, You will seek support prematurely and trade autonomy for comfort. Machiavelli warned against this instinct because alliances formed from weakness always carry a hidden price. Another paradox appears here. Isolation exposes how performative most ambition really is. Ask yourself honestly how many of your goals were shaped to be seen rather than to be lived. When no one is watching, certain desires lose their charge. You discover which ambitions were borrowed, which dreams were fueled by comparison, and which goals survive even in silence. This pruning feels like loss, but it is actually precision. A quieter, more durable motivation replaces the old one. You stop asking, "How will this look?" and start asking, "What will this change?" That shift alone alters the trajectory of your actions. Modern culture sells the idea that visibility equals progress, but Machiavellian logic reverses this. Visibility attracts interference. Advice, envy, expectations, sabotage disguised as concern. When you have no support, you also have no audience. This allows you to experiment without identity risk. You can fail without reputation damage. You can pivot without explanation. You can build foundations instead of facades. People who rise loudly often become prisoners of their early image. People who rise quietly retain strategic flexibility. This is not humility, it is advantage. At a deeper level, succeeding without support restructures your relationship with fear. Fear thrives on imagined judgment. When no one is there to judge, fear loses one of its main fuel sources. What remains is raw uncertainty, which is harder but cleaner. You are no longer afraid of disappointing others, you are only dealing with consequence. This is where courage becomes functional rather than emotional. You act not because you feel brave, but because action is necessary. Over time, this builds a form of resilience that does not rely on motivation. You move even when you feel empty. There is also a spiritual dimension to unsupported effort that rarely gets discussed. When external reassurance disappears, you are forced into an internal dialogue that cannot be outsourced. You begin to confront questions about meaning that encouragement usually masks. Why continue when no one sees you? Why persist when results are delayed? Why choose discipline over escape when no one rewards you? These questions are uncomfortable because they strip life down to intention. Machiavelli understood that men who cannot answer these questions become dependent on circumstance. Those who can answer them become self-directed. Many people confuse this phase with depression, and sometimes it overlaps, but they are not the same. Depression collapses possibility. Machiavellian isolation sharpens it. The difference lies in direction. If your solitude pushes you toward avoidance, numbness, or self-destruction, something is unresolved. But if it pushes you toward clarity, structure, and deliberate effort, you're in a transitional state. The pain is not a signal to stop. It is friction generated by growth without witnesses. The mind resists this because it is unfamiliar, not because it is wrong. Another trap appears once you start gaining traction alone, the fantasy of moral superiority. You may begin to see yourself as stronger, more disciplined, more evolved than those who needed support. This is subtle ego re-entry. Machiavellian wisdom is not about feeling superior, it is about staying unexposed. The moment you turn solitude into identity, you reattach your worth to a narrative. True independence is quiet. It does not need contrast, it does not need enemies, it simply operates. As you go deeper, you realize that zero support does not mean zero connection forever. It means zero dependence during construction. Machiavelli did not reject alliances, he rejected reliance. There is a difference. When you build alone first, you later choose relationships from strength, not hunger. You are no longer trying to be rescued, you are evaluating alignment. This reverses power dynamics entirely. People sense it. Even if they cannot articulate why you feel different, they feel that you do not need them, and paradoxically, this makes your presence more respected. One of the least understood aspects of unsupported success is timing of disclosure. When you have support, you tend to narrate your journey as it unfolds. When you are alone, you learn to reveal only outcomes. This protects your momentum. Words drain energy when they are not backed by structure. Silence preserves it. This is why Machiavelli valued restraint in speech, not because secrets are noble, but because premature exposure weakens execution. You learn to let results speak, not intentions. There is a moment, often unnoticed, when something shifts internally. You stop checking whether anyone believes in you. The question simply disappears. Not because it was answered, but because it lost relevance. This is the psychological turning point. From here on, progress accelerates, not always visibly, but internally. Your decisions become cleaner, your routines become simpler, your standards rise without external pressure. You are no longer fueled by hope or fear, but by alignment between action and self-respect. Yet one final illusion must be dismantled. Succeeding with zero support does not guarantee happiness, peace, or fulfillment. It guarantees ownership. Ownership of your choices, your failures, your trajectory. Many people secretly avoid this because it removes the ability to blame. If no one helped you, no one can be held responsible either. This level of responsibility is heavy. It is also liberating. Machiavelli understood that freedom and burden are inseparable. To rule yourself, you must carry the weight of your outcomes without witnesses. This brings us to the most uncomfortable insight of all. The pain you felt when support vanished was not just loss, it was initiation into authorship of your own life. Support delays this moment. Isolation accelerates it. The reason so few people succeed without help is not because it is impossible, but because it demands a level of internal honesty most are unwilling to face. They prefer to be accompanied in illusion rather than alone in truth. Now the question is no longer whether you can succeed without support. The deeper question is whether you are willing to apply this understanding deliberately instead of waiting for life to force it upon you. Because once you see how solitude sharpens power, you can either endure it passively or use it strategically. And that choice is where theory ends and practice begins. If you want to succeed with zero support, you cannot rely on motivation, inspiration, or emotional highs. You need structure that works even when you feel empty. The first practical shift is radical ownership of your days. When no one is watching, time either dissolves or concentrates. Decide that every day, no matter how small, must contain one deliberate act that moves you forward. Not 10. 1. This trains your mind to associate progress with execution, not mood. You stop waiting to feel ready. You act because action is now your only proof of existence. The second practice is silent planning. Write your goals, but never speak them out loud. Not because secrecy is mystical, but because words create psychological debt. When you tell people what you plan to do, your brain receives a false sense of completion. Silence keeps the tension alive. Use a private system, a notebook, a document, or a mental framework where you break long-term aims into short, brutal tasks. Focus on leverage, not effort. Ask yourself daily, what is the smallest action that creates the greatest future advantage? This trains Machiavellian efficiency rather than heroic exhaustion. Next comes emotional discipline. Zero support means your emotions will fluctuate without regulation from others. Instead of fighting this, you must learn to observe it. Each time discouragement appears, label it without drama. Say internally, this is doubt, or this is fatigue, and continue anyway. You are not suppressing emotion, you are refusing to negotiate with it. Over time, your nervous system learns that feelings are information, not commands. This is one of the most powerful skills you can develop because it prevents internal sabotage when external reinforcement is absent. Another crucial practice is controlled isolation. This does not mean cutting everyone off in anger. It means choosing periods of reduced social exposure where your identity is not being reinforced or questioned. During these phases, limit conversations that revolve around validation, complaint, or comparison. Your mind needs quiet to recalibrate. Most people are exhausted not by work but by constant emotional exchange. Reducing this noise restores cognitive clarity and allows deeper focus. You are not becoming antisocial. You are becoming internally referenced. You must also master self-feedback. When no one gives you encouragement or correction, you must become both architect and critic. At the end of each week, review your actions coldly. What worked, what wasted time, what avoided discomfort. No self-punishment, no self-praise, only assessment. This creates a feedback loop that replaces external evaluation. Over time, you become extremely accurate about your own behavior, which is rare and valuable. Most people either inflate or destroy themselves emotionally. Precision is strength. One of the hardest practices is learning to act without emotional reward. Many tasks necessary for success are boring, repetitive, and invisible. When you have support, praise fills the gap. Without it, boredom becomes dangerous. The solution is ritual. Attach fixed times and environments to certain actions. Same hour, same place, same rules. This removes decision fatigue and emotional bargaining. You do not ask whether you feel like doing the work, you simply enter the ritual. Consistency replaces enthusiasm. You must also reframe rejection and indifference as data. When people ignore your efforts, resist the urge to personalize it. Ask instead, what does this tell me about timing, positioning, or clarity? Machiavellian thinking transforms emotional reactions into strategic insight. Indifference often means invisibility, not inadequacy. Invisibility can be solved with skill, patience, or redirection. Taking it personally wastes energy that could be used to adapt. Another key application is delayed alliance. Do not seek support while you are still unstable. Build competence first, build proof first. Then, when alliances form, they are based on value rather than sympathy. This prevents dependence and power imbalance. You are no longer asking to be believed, you are being evaluated. This shift protects your autonomy and reduces manipulation disguised as help. You should also practice controlled exposure to discomfort. Each week, choose one action you are avoiding because no one will applaud it. Do it anyway. Send the message, publish the work, train the skill. This conditions your mind to move forward without external reward. Over time, fear loses its authority because it is no longer obeyed. Courage becomes procedural rather than emotional. Finally, redefine success internally. If your definition depends on recognition, you will always feel behind. Instead, define success as alignment between intention and action. Did you do what you said you would do, even when no one knew? That becomes the metric. This creates self-respect, which is far more stable than confidence. Confidence fluctuates, self-respect compounds. Expect resistance, expect loneliness, expect moments where quitting feels rational. These are not signs of failure, they are signs that you are no longer anesthetized by approval. Zero support strips life down to its core mechanics: action, consequence, responsibility. If you apply these practices consistently, something subtle but irreversible will happen. You will stop asking whether you are supported. The question will no longer make sense. And when support eventually appears, as it often does once momentum is visible, you will be able to accept it without needing it. This is how you succeed with zero support, not by becoming hard, but by becoming internally anchored. Not by rejecting others, but by no longer outsourcing your direction. And once that shift is complete, nothing external can truly destabilize you again. If you listen carefully, you'll notice that everything we've uncovered points to one quiet truth. Success without support is not a punishment, it is a refinement. When no one stands behind you, life removes the last excuses, the last illusions, the last emotional crutches. You are forced to meet yourself without filters. You learn that discipline is more reliable than motivation, that silence protects momentum, and that self-respect grows only when action continues in the absence of applause. Machiavellian success is not about domination over others, but mastery over dependence. It is about building an inner axis that does not bend when approval disappears. You've seen how lack of support sharpens judgment, exposes ego traps, dissolves borrowed ambitions, and replaces hope with preparation. You've seen why isolation hurts at first, and why that pain is not a signal to stop but a signal that authorship has begun. You've also seen that this path is not romantic. It offers no guarantees of comfort or recognition. What it offers is ownership. And ownership is the rarest form of freedom in a world addicted to validation. Most people will never choose this path consciously. They will wait to be supported before they act, and by the time support arrives, their will has weakened. You now know the reversal. Act first, build silently, stabilize internally, and let alliances come later if they come at all. Not from hunger, but from alignment. Not from need, but from strength. So here is the question that remains, and it is deliberately unsettling. If no one ever believed in you, if no one ever encouraged you, if no one ever noticed your effort, would you still choose to become who you know you could be? Not to prove them wrong, not to be seen, but because walking away would mean betraying yourself. If this message resonated, leave a comment with the phrase you chose earlier and let it mark your commitment in silence. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring these uncomfortable truths most people avoid, and if you stay with this mindset long enough, you will discover something few ever do. When you stop needing support, you become impossible to manipulate, impossible to derail, and quietly inevitable.